Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Cool, awesome. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I am Renuka and I'll be talking about product management mental models today. Oh, sure. Cool. Sorry. Before I talk about the topic, I want to share a few words about my career and what I've done so far. I've been working in the tech industry for over 11 years now. I worked with a couple of startups and a few large companies, and I currently work with Shopify. I was in Germany for 3 years, and a few months ago, I made a move to Singapore. I am in Singapore right now. So the content about today's topic, I will be sharing about on what is a mental model. After that, I'll cover a few mental models like first principles thinking, Cynefin Framework, cargo culting, and then we'll wrap things up by sharing what is a lattice work and how to build a lattice work of mental models. A few caveats. The views, the things that I'm going to share are my personal views. They do not represent Shopify. There are a few examples from Shopify, which I will be calling out. I would encourage you all to read more about these models that I will talk about today. And if you have any questions after the session, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. The last caveat is I have built a product in Shopify called B2B Search, and I'll be using that example of B2B Search while sharing some of these mental models applications. So let's dig in. What is a mental model? A mental model is a framework for thinking. It simplifies complex things so your brain can reason through them. They are thinking tools. To explain more about mental model, I've taken these screenshots to give you example. So if you look around, mental models are all around us. The first screenshot is from Singapore. Singapore government created a three-phase model to share with people in Singapore how they are planning to reopen, economy after or during COVID-19. So for in each phase, they have a set of instructions. There are a set of guidelines. And also there are things that we as civilians can expect in phase 1, 2, and 3. Currently, we are in phase 2. Similarly, Singapore has a DORSCON alert system. So DORSCON is a disease outbreak response condition. This is built by Singapore government, and this is an alert system which shares, in which condition the current outbreak is in. So for example, currently for COVID-19, Singapore is in orange color coding, and each color coding has certain guidelines for the government, for civilians, and for organizations, which they have to follow to control or to handle the outbreak. So currently we are in COVID-19 outbreak. Some time ago, Singapore also had SARS outbreak. And similarly, if there is something in future, so they can use this model again, which I hope doesn't happen. They can use this model again to deal with the situation, and the people in the country stay informed. And then we have the third screenshot is from Slack. So over here, if you see, there are some highlighted channels and de-highlighted channels. And when you see a highlighted channel, you know that you have some unread messages over there. So similarly, Gmail has the same thing. Yahoo has the same thing. You have the similar sort of pattern in messaging systems. So this is a design. This is a mental model that's created long ago by probably Yahoo or Google, and now this is adopted by a lot of people. And whenever you see a highlighted sort of notification, you know that there is something, it's asking for some attention. There is something unread over there. And we have, like, when you see this search icon and, you see the search bar in any website, you know that you can go to this bar, type a keyword or, and then, click on search and it will search within that website. Same, you have, like, breadcrumb. Even if people don't know the term breadcrumb, but they know that these are links, and when I click on home, I will be taken back to the home screen of the website. So these are mental models that are built by software companies for their customers to operate in a certain way. So similarly, we have mental models that we use in the form of processes. Like we have, the way we conduct meetings and workshops, we use Agile, and we have, like, the Scrum meetings. So those are all sort of a structured way of thinking, mental models built by, one organization. It worked well, or people or individual worked well for those people, and then they tried to build the same mental model in different situations, or in the same situation and multiple times, and it works out well. So then it's called a mental model. So these are the example of, like, models that are existing out there, and we try to reuse. What we can do, especially as designers, product managers, or even software engineers, we can also think about different mental models. Like, we can learn the existing models, see how the structured way of thinking works. And when we face a problem, if the existing model doesn't work out, and if there is something new that you can construct on your own, and if that model works out in multiple scenarios, or in same scenario and multiple times for different people, you can also call that a mental model. So these are all like structured way of thinking. It's called a mental model. So I hope mental model is what is a mental model is clear now. So as product managers, because the session is mainly targeting product managers, so as product managers, we don't just consume existing mental models, we also build them. When I say we build them, we are building mental models in the form of products. When we build products, we want the user to do like step 1, 2, 3, right? So we keep all the flow in our mind and we build products in that way, and we want the user to follow the flow. And it's not like those flows are like, based on the existing user behavior or based on some sort of research that we have conducted. And that's a flow also becomes a mental model. So this is why for us, we need to first understand what are mental models, learn about the existing mental models, and then build products keeping these mental models in mind so that these products work as mental models for users. Cool. So let's start with the first mental model that I'm going to share with you. It's called first principles thinking. If you have any question, please type it in the Q&A tab, and Divya will take the question and maybe speak it out here. So the first principles thinking, so first principle thinking is a sort of a building blocks of an idea. So they are the parts that we know are true, and we build complex thoughts on top of them. To understand first principles thinking, I would like to share what is general thinking and first principles so that you can understand the difference. In case of first principles thinking, you keep looking until you find the truth. You break things down, you break the problem down in core pieces and then find a solution. In case of general thinking, you accept what is widely held as truth. So you build your hypothesis based on certain assumptions. In case of first principles thinking, you actually figure out the truth behind those assumptions. You have a lot of like all the information about the assumption. and then on the basis of that assumption, you are building a hypothesis. But in case of general thinking, you just assume like, certain things work in certain way, and then you keep building stuff on top of that. And like, so in case of first principles thinking, everything about the product you're working on or the problem that you're working on, everything about the users, and then from there you start building features on top. So in case of first principles thinking, you boil things down to the fundamental truths and then reason up from there. To give you an example of first principles thinking, I would like to share two personalities, Aristotle and Elon Musk. Aristotle he was a Greek philosopher. He's the one who introduced first principle thinking concept. So what he says is everything can be divided into categories and subcategories. The smallest subcategory is the first principle. What Elon Musk does, he uses first principle thinking while building his companies and products. In like few interviews, he has shared his ideas, like how he built Tesla and SpaceX using first principles thinking concept. So in one of such interviews, he shared his story about Tesla, that when he was building Tesla cars, and one of the problems that they were facing was that the batteries were very expensive. They were around, the battery cost was around $600 kilowatt per hour. But Elon Musk wanted the batteries to be a bit cheaper so that the cars can be affordable by people. And he called out his team, asked them, is there a way to get cheaper batteries? And his team said that we can figure things out, but the cost is not gonna go very low. In future, it'll eventually go high. So this is the $600 or around $600 is the cost, and this is how it has been, and this is how it will be. Then what Elon Musk did, he started reading about how batteries are built. What are the materials that's there inside the battery? So for example, there is nickel, there's carbon, aluminum, and there's like few more things, and there's like a steel frame on the top. So what he did, he broke things down, like after understanding how batteries are made, he broke those different material down, and then he figured out if he were to buy those material in mass, how much would it cost him, and then if he were to build those batteries in-house or by another factory who's like partner with them, how much would it cost? So the overall, after he did all the maths, the overall cost was coming somewhere around $80. And then he shared it with his team, and eventually they started manufacturing batteries, which eventually opened up another revenue stream for Tesla. So this is how when like Elon Musk faces problem, he thinks through first principles to find the solution. Similarly, when he was building SpaceX, a lot of people did not click with his vision. And for SpaceX, he wanted to buy rockets, and he went to Russia to buy rockets from there. And people made fun of him. They said that, this is not the right vision, and this is not the right thing to do. But then he started learning how the rockets are made. He read a lot of books, spoke to the right people, and eventually SpaceX built rockets on their own. And now we know that this is a success story. So for product managers, if we were to think in using first principles, I have this 4-step approach to think through first principles thinking. So whenever we're working on a problem or on a product, what we can do is we need to first identify our goals. And the goals must be clear and specific. List down all the actions or hypotheses, the things that we need to do to achieve these goals. So usually there are multiple actions to achieve one goal for each action. So this is on the step 3 is where the first principles thinking come into picture. So for each action, discover the first principles. So understand what's the truth behind that action, how this can be done. And if there are current assumptions for that action, figure out, how those assumptions are made, how those assumptions are working by asking powerful questions either to yourself or to the people who have the knowledge about those actions. So understand the truth behind those assumptions, and then you can go ahead, and build creative solutions. One thing that can be done to think through first principles thinking when we are using this 4-step approach is to break the problem down in tree format. So tree has like leaves, branches, trunk, and roots. So figure out in a given product, problem, or a feature. So what are the leaves? What are the branches? What are the roots? And then organize the information. Write things down to organize it, and then question everything. Do you understand the root of the problem? Do you understand the trunk? Or maybe you're just like focusing on the leaves. At least personally, when I started working as a product manager, there were a lot of times when I was just building features because it was told me to build that feature, and that feature makes sense, and there were a set of assumptions that I was taking. So I was not like digging things down. And then later, in my career, I started thinking through first principles, and I did not build products until I understood the overall area. In terms of asking powerful questions, I think what you can do as a product manager is to always start with the why. Ask 5 whys to understand the problem in depth from people who have the knowledge of the problem. This can be your customers, can be your research team, can be your stakeholders. So understand, so we use like 5 whys usually in the post-mortem meetings, but I believe the 5 whys can be used in research during the product discovery phase as well. And especially when you're building features on top of mature products, on top of the products that are already built, first understand what is the products that are that's built. What are the different areas of that product? Why was it built? How was it built? And everything about the existing product, and then start building features on top of that. I'm going to skip this slide. Maybe you can go through this when you receive this presentation. It's just in the interest of time because I want to share a few more models. Does anyone have any question in here? Cool. So I think I'll move on. Before I jump to the next mental model, I want to share that why decision making is an important factor of a product manager's job. As product managers, we spend a lot of time in meetings. We have a lot of stakeholders, internal, external stakeholders. We interact with almost every single department of our of the organization where we work. Based on the projects we are working on. We do project planning, we do prioritization strategy, we build roadmaps, we understand the why, then we decide the what, the how, and the when. When we are doing all this, things, we are constantly making decisions. So these decisions can be small, medium, large, can be reversible decisions, irreversible decisions. And this is why I believe that, as product managers, decision making is more crucial for us than probably rest of the domains in an organization. So the next framework or mental model is called Cynefin Framework. This is a decision-making framework where this framework was created by Dave Snowden, who is a researcher in the field of knowledge management. It's spelled as Cynefin, but pronounced as Cynefin because it's a Welsh word. Dave Snowden comes from UK, and he named this framework as Cynefin, and it means habitat. This framework offers 5 decision-making domains. These domains are obvious, or you can call it simple, complicated, complex, chaotic, and a center of disorder. The Cynefin framework is a model for assessing the type of the problem, situation, or domain you are in and applying the decision-making process to match. So let's go through these domains. The first domain is obvious domain. in case of obvious domain, we sense the problem and then we make a decision. So obvious is a simple domain where the cause and effect are directly related to each other. For example, if it's minus 20 degrees outside, and if you go out without sweater, you know that you're going to catch a cold. Or if, let's say, you're baking cake and you follow the same steps as you followed, yesterday while baking cake, you know the end result is going to be the same. So you basically take a decision, make a decision, and you know what's going to be the effect of impact of your decision, right? And there are, like, when in product management as well, so you have a lot of obvious decisions where everyone agrees like, yeah, this is the right thing to do, or like, that if I do this, it's gonna impact your product or your customer in a certain way, because it would have it would have impacted in a similar way multiple times in the past as well. Next domain is complicated domain. A lot of product managers usually are in this domain or situation. So in complicated situation, you have cause and effect. They are not directly related to each other, but they're somehow indirectly related to each other. So what you do in the complicated situation is you first sense the problem, then you analyze it, and then you make a decision. So when I say analyze, it means you do research. So you have a problem, you understand what the problem, and then you you look into the data, you do a researcher by talking to people who have the knowledge about the given problem, and then, like, based on that, you draw some sort of conclusion, and you know what's going to be you have somewhat idea what's going to be the impact of the decision that you make in this situation. So this is, like, the general product building situation where you have to build a product. You do the product research, do the research phase. In the research phase, you talk to customer, you talk to a lot of people, you look into the existing data, and then you make a decision, and then based on the decision you build products. Next one is a complex domain. In the complex domain, here also there are a lot of product managers, a lot of companies who work in the complex domain way. So in complex domain, cause and effect are not directly or indirectly related to each other, but they're related to each other in hindsight. It means they're sort of in the same bucket. When you see the result, you knew the result happened because of this decision, but you can't know that until it happens. So what you do in case of complex domain is you first probe, means you run experiments, then you understand, like, what we can do, and then you make a decision. So like something that a lot of innovation falls under this, something where you don't have any data if the thing that the feature that you're building is right or not. So you first run the experiment, you gather the information, and then you decide if this is the right thing to do or not. Fourth domain is called chaotic domain, where cause and effect are not related to each other. In case of chaotic domain, you first act, then sense, and then you make a decision. So this can be like, a chaotic situation, like your system is down. When your system is down, or the website that you're working on is down, you wouldn't start to run experiments, or you wouldn't do research. All you want to do is first act. You reach out to the right people, or you yourself just go ahead and fix the problem, and then you try to sense. Then you try to make sense out of, like, what happened, why it happened. And if you have to make any long-term decision, then you make a decision on after sensing the problem. So these are the four main domains where most of us fall in these domains or situations whenever we are making decisions. The fifth domain is the center, which is called disorder. So disorder state is a state when we don't know in which state we are, and when we don't know in which domain we are, we fall under disorder state. So before I learned about Cynefin Framework, I didn't know, like, while making decisions, I didn't know if it was obvious, complicated, complex, or chaotic. So I was mainly in disorder state, and I was making decision based on certain factors without understanding the situation. So that's the obvious domain. We all should just try to avoid the disorder state. So this arrow indicates that if we treat every situation, if we treat every problem and as obvious or simple problem, and we make obvious decisions, there are chances that we can fall in fall in the chaotic situation pretty fast. So other example of obvious domain is like, dictators usually fall under this, because whatever they say, they think it's right. And when they keep making those decisions because they think it's right, they think it's obvious and simple, and then the country falls in chaotic state. To explain Cynefin framework in the product building way, how I use the Cynefin framework while building products. So this is the product that I built. It's B2B search within Shopify. So it has search bar, it has product price, categories, some sorting, some sort of help. So when I was listing, making decision on what we want to build in this search, it was not there. So I built it from scratch. What I did was I broke down the whole search into different these situations. So there are some things that fall under obvious. So to have a search, we need a sort of a place where people can type keyword. We need some place where people can see the product, and we know that people can't buy products until they see the price. So we need to show the price, the picture. So there are some information in the search which is pretty obvious that we need when we are building a search. There are some things that are complicated where I had to do research. So for example, I was not sure if we want to have categories listed over here, or can we just ignore categories and just provide search? Do we need sorting? Do we need to show this product information like like rating or the other information, number of orders and stuff? I did research. I looked into the existing information that we had, spoke to customers what they think about it, spoke to some experienced people within the company who had worked on other search products, and then I made a decision based on the research. So these things fell under complicated domain. Then there's a complex part as well. So in case of complex part, there are some things that are like I was not sure if those things are needed. Even during the research, I couldn't figure out the strong points to have those things in search. For example, help. So this is a video. When you click on it, it shows a video that shares how to find products in here and what are the right products. Similarly, there is some additional information. There is some information in the detail page of search. So there were those things which I didn't know. I couldn't figure out from research, couldn't figure out by talking to people. So I ran some experiments to understand what's the consumption of those features. And once I had the experiment results, I included some of those things based on the result and excluded some things that did not make sense. So in case of search, the chaotic situation would be that once we launch search and the search page is not working. So that would be chaotic situation. The first thing I want to do is to just fix it or get it fixed. Any questions?
Hey, Renuka, we do have some questions. So to start with, the first question is, do you need some tools to organize the thoughts when applying first principle? Theoretically, it looks straightforward how to think, but when you actually do it, it just becomes very difficult.
Yeah, so let me just go back to first principle. Yeah, so I think first of all, it's a great question. Sorry, who is it from?
This is an anonymous attendee.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So thanks for asking who had asked this question. So yeah, I think I do understand, it's not easy to use first principles thinking, and especially it also depends on the the product and the problem that you're solving. And it also depends, like, if you have any sort of urgency in doing things, if you have, like, certain timelines and you don't have the time to think through first principles, and sometimes you tend to avoid this. So I think for me, the thing that works out, the framework that works out is this 4-step approach and then this tree structure. So from my side, when I'm working on a problem, and then I find out the solution, I try to break the problem or the solution into a tree structure. So what are the top parts? Maybe I can give example. This one, the search example. So for example, when the same search product, when I was working on it, and we knew that, based on the customer problem and the feature request, and based on our company KPIs, we knew that we needed search. And still, like, this was something that was brought up by my manager, saying that this is the product that we want to build because it falls under our strategy. So first of all, I asked that guy, questions, my manager questions, of why are we doing it, understand the whole overall story and the data behind what we are building. And then in case of like general thinking, I would, just, in case of search, there's like search in like tons of different platforms. You study those platforms, and then, you start with building very basic keyword-based search. But basically for me, there is no as such, like, a framework that I can use which can help me to think through first principles thinking. But for me to understand the fundamental truth behind the problem. So for me, the fundamental truth behind the search was like, why do we want to build search? Because, like, we want people to buy products from our platform. And what are these, like, who are these people, and what are they looking for? So these people are our customer, our businesses who are coming to our platform to find good quality product, to find fast shipping and cheap product, right? So these were the fundamental truths that I found based on my research, which was not obvious, which was not very clear initially when I started working on search. So nobody from our from my, like, the customer segment that I have, nobody will come and say, hey, I want bad quality product. Nobody will come and say, I want, a large, long shipping time or expensive product. So everyone is looking for good quality, fast product and cheap, cheap prices. So these are the fundamental truths. Once I found this, and then the shape of the search changed drastically than what I had in mind earlier. So in terms of framework, I would suggest to use this 4-step approach. This 4-step approach, one thing that really helped me was to write things down on papers.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. The next question is, Lena asks, if a decision can be taken without quant data, if so, how do you make sure if it is the right decision?
Sorry, if I understood the question right, she's asking if the decision can be made without the data.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for the question, Lena. So yeah, I think there are quite a few decisions that we can take without any data, and those are pretty obvious and simple decisions. So for example, this search product that I shared with you, I can, again, go back in here. So when, like, when we figured out, the problem that we wanted to do, we knew that that problem can be fixed using search product, and we wanted to build this search service within our platform. And in search, it was pretty obvious we need a place, like, we need the search bar. So you don't need data. You don't have to, ask your users or, even look into the existing data. Do we need the search bar or not? Or we don't have to, like, look into the data to see if we need any, like, if we need to show a product in search page or not. So these are the simple decisions that we come across as product managers, as we, like, gain more knowledge about the business, understand our customers better. Some of the things become pretty obvious, but I do understand that, sometimes some things that we treat are obvious or simple. They're actually complex or complicated. So we need to just understand just understand the situation we are in. There are cases where we are in obvious situation, and there are cases where we are in complicated. So it's just the obvious is something that's super basic, where you just need to have that. I hope it
Okay,
answers.
thank you.
Yeah.
The next question is that, next question is from Rajat, and he asks if you could share some examples on how you've used first principle thinking in the past. Is there any particular project or something?
I think it sort of answered earlier where I shared the search example. So like in search, when I was working on search initially, I just, if I think using general thinking, I would just build normal search. But in case of using like first principles thinking, I had to do extensive research, understand the customer segment, understand why do they want to search product, and in the end I found these three are the fundamental truths.
Okay, thank you so much. So we do have some more questions. So the next question is from Christine. In Shopify, how do you use the principles to make a product decision? It sounds like all disciplines give information to the PM, and you make the decision. Is that right?
Not necessarily. uh, so so basically we have different decisions. So there are technical decisions, there are product related decisions, there are design related decisions. Yeah, so one example I can share is so product managers are mainly responsible for product related decisions. In Shopify, the way we work is we work in the form of trifectas. So every team has a trifecta. So this trifecta is product manager, design lead, and tech lead. So these three people exist in every single team, and they three are responsible for making the product the team is building, the product level. Like when I say products, is technical, non-technical, and design. Product level decision, the team and team level decisions. But what happens is PM is the ultimate owner of the trifecta. If let's say we are stuck on a decision where we don't know what to do, so usually product manager steps in and the product manager says we want to go in this direction. And mainly for technical decisions, mainly tech lead is responsible, and they have enough knowledge in the technical domain, and we usually honor their decision. Similarly for design, we honor the decision that's made by the designer, and they honor the decision related to product, mainly like customers and business. That usually comes from the product manager.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have another question, which is how do you prioritize matrix?
Sorry, which metric?
Okay, so we'll probably ask for more clarification on that and maybe take it in the next session. Other than that, we just have last question from Veronica that when working with a B2B2C product, we often do not get access to the end consumers of our products. So what are the alternative ways we can understand our user needs without being able to talk, interview, or survey them?
Without interview, talk, and survey the end consumers, right? If I understood the question.
Yeah. So in case of a B2B2C product, when we are not in direct contact with customers, so how do we understand their needs?
Cool. So when I'm assuming when you say customer, it means the end consumer, right? So yeah, I think in Shopify, I face this problem a lot where even when I'm building products for other businesses, these products are eventually getting consumed by the end consumer, which means the businesses customers. In this case, for us. I mean, for me, my customers, so first of all, I need to understand who are the customers. So there are some products within Shopify where the customer segmentation, my customer segmentation is customer segment is the business. So those products are purely consumed by the business, and that they have something else that is getting consumed by the customer. And then there are products within Shopify which are getting consumed mainly by the end consumer. So for example, the online store, that we know that the Shopify online store, this is being viewed and used by the consumer. So in that case, for that team, and the products, when I build some products which are directly related to the end consumer, so those end consumers become my direct customer segment. So it's not necessarily the business, or it's the business and the consumer, or it's just the consumer. That's my the main customer segment. In that case, one thing that helps me is to look into the existing data. I think so even in Shopify earlier, we were not storing a lot of data, and then we started storing data. And I think the data, like the data helps me to understand the behavior of end consumer, and then it helps me to take a lot of decisions. And then there are some times when I don't have the data. The only option over there is to figure out ways to understand the end consumer. So this can be, like you said, if it can be either surveys or interview them. And within Shopify, we also have a research team, and the research team is not tied with any team. So that's an independent research team, and they're constantly doing research on both businesses and the end consumer. So we also receive a lot of information from there. And the other thing that helps me is to talk to the business. So the businesses, so there is the businesses know more about their customers than I know about their customers. So talking to businesses also help me to understand the end consumer. So I think the only answer is to look into the data and talk to businesses.
Okay, thank you so much. So the last question is from Vamsi, and it's regarding the framework that you just discussed, which is Cynefin Framework. And she's asking if the idea in the Cynefin Framework to move all the complex to either complicated or obvious categories, are those the main goals behind experiments to make things more clear?
Sorry, Divya, your voice was breaking. I couldn't hear the middle part. Could you repeat the question, Divya? What?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what I meant was, so the next question is from Vamsi, and she says if the idea in the Cynefin framework to move all the complex is to move all the complex to either complicated or obvious categories.
Oh yeah.
And are those the main goals behind the experiments?
First of all, that's a great question. Yeah. So the way it works is, so you have like first you analyze the current situation. So there is some information that flows from obvious to complicated. There are some situation once you make a decision and next time the same situation becomes complicated and then it becomes complex. Yeah, so the idea is to run experiments in complex and eventually learn from those experiments and move those situation or domain or areas into the complicated side. So in case of complicated domain, you already you have done these things in the past. You have some sort of data and you run experiments in complex and then you move to complicated. Yes, that's the right understanding.
Sure. Thanks.
Was it the last question, Divya? Okay, cool. I'm gonna move on then. Cool. So the next mental model that I'm going to share is called cargo cult or cargo culting. So cargo cult is nothing but following instructions and hoping to get some result without knowing what the instructions actually do. So it means like, you copy things without knowing what exactly you're copying, and you're just hoping to get the same result that, the other person who followed the similar instructions got the result. So in case of cargo culting is a general term to describe the adoption of a technology or practice based on the observation that it has been used elsewhere without understanding the motive of its use elsewhere. So I want to share a story to explain, how cargo culting concept was introduced and how it works. So during the World War II, so the story goes something like during the World War II, America wanted to bomb Japan, and Japan is pretty far away from America, and there's like a lot of water on the way, and there are some islands close to in the middle, like close to Japan. So what America started doing, they started creating their air force bases in some of those islands. In one of those islands, these American Air Force people, they cut down the trees. They created they landed their planes over there. They created these radio stations so that they could communicate back home. They had these microphones, headphones. They had cars, and islanders, people from that island, they were pre-civilized people, so they did not understand American English. They couldn't communicate with them, but they were observing what these people were doing. And Americans were also sharing food and clothes with some of these islanders. And like what these islanders observed, that there's like once in a while there is a sort of cargo plane that comes in. It drops a lot of food and clothes, and then the Air Force people who are there, they eat that food, they share the food with them, and they wear new clothes. And so then after the war was over, the people, like Americans, left that island, and the islanders were sort of like puzzled, like what just happened, when are they coming back? And what these people started doing, they started building planes, and these different figures, cars, whole like microphone, using wood and wicker and twigs. um, so they saw these things happening. They saw, like, there were these similar shape looking things over here. They created plane runways, and they were hoping the cargoes to come and drop food for them. So this thing continued for some time, and eventually this was discovered by some people who named it as cargo culting, which means people were sort of just copying the things without understanding the science behind those things. They were just following instruction. There was this one person going, with the microphone saying something, and they were just hoping that the same thing happened for the Americans over here, and the result would be that some plane will come and drop food for us. In Shopify, the cargo cult concept was, introduced to us by Toby in one of our Shopify summits. Shopify has annual summit where everyone who works with Shopify, we all travel to Canada and meet each other. And in that event, it's usually 2 days event. In that event, our leadership team, or leaders of different teams, they share what they have done so far, what's their planning, and how the senior leadership team is, like, planning to run the company, and they share different concepts. So during one of those events, our CEO Toby shared cargo culting concept, which is we are using extensively within Shopify. So we use cargo culting word pretty often. And what our CEO Toby said was that treat Shopify as your home, and if you see some walls in your home, which you don't understand, you don't know why this wall exists, and just try to break those walls. Try to build new walls that you think make sense. And if you break existing walls, worst can happen that somebody will come and stop you. If no one stops you and you break the wall, it's like, the wall should not have been there. And like, he very openly say that, we should not follow anything just because it was told by superior, just because it was told by, even the CEO. Understand things using first principles thinking, understand in and out of the problem, the feature, the product that you're working on, and then build stuff, and analyze cause and effect before making a decision. So we usually cargo cult when we don't understand the meaning behind things, we don't understand the why behind things, and we still do things because some superior told us to do so. We build things to achieve North Star. We all have North Stars, North Star in Shopify, we have two North Stars. We all have North Stars in our companies. We try to achieve that North Star without understanding why that North Star exists, and like what exactly it is, and like, when was it set up. Without understanding the North Star, we tend to achieve it by, building different KPIs, by building different products. When we do that, we are actually cargo culting. To avoid cargo culting, what we need to do is we need to think through first principles thinking. We need to understand the cause. We need to understand why something happens and the effect, what happens as a result, to before making a decision or before building products. That's the way we can avoid cargo culting as a, like, a cargo culting mental model. Any questions? Divya? Okay.
Yeah. We do not have any questions for now. 1 second. Yeah, we do not have any questions for now. So I think we can go ahead.
Cool. So to wrap things up, I want to share latest work of mental model. I think there was also a question about like how we can link these different mental models together. So I just shared 3 mental models. There are, hundreds of different mental models that exist out there. And in one of the slides, I have listed down 25 different mental models. So the lattice, what is a lattice work? A lattice work is a pattern on wood or metal consisting of crisscross strips. The design is created by crossing strips to form a network. So it looks something like, the screenshots that I have attached here. To build a truly effective lattice work of mental models, you need to apply the models on real world problems. So why not just like learn hundreds of different mental models and have a checklist and understand in a given situation you can, which mental model fits in and apply. That's actually not the right approach. The right approach would be to learn all the mental models and have connect all the dots and see some models are, for some situations, they give you benefit, but then if applied in a not so right situation, they can also create problems for you. So if you see, for example, when we discussed, the cargo cult mental model, this can be achieved by using first principles thinking. This can be achieved by understanding the cause and effect, which is actually the Cynefin Framework mental model. So you need to have like all the mental models, learn about everything, and see how they're connected to each other. And in some situation, you sort of apply the multiple mental models at once. You don't have to really call out. So for example, when I work on things, I don't really call out, okay, this is the mental model that I'm applying. It just, once you start applying, once you experience these mental models, it just becomes they become part of your general thinking. And like, so basically, in a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which I suppose many of you would have read. It's a book by Daniel Kahneman. He shares how we have the two system of our brain, how we think using two systems, system 1 and system 2. System 1 is generally like, the system that we usually use, and it's fast, and we make fast decisions using system 1. And system 2 is a system where we use reasoning, we use logic to use system 2. Once you start using system 2, it becomes your primary system. So usually system 1 is our primary, but once you keep using system 2, system 2 becomes your primary system. Similarly, when you learn a lot of mental models and initially you probably call out, you say, okay, in this project, I'm going to use this mental model and XYZ. And once you start doing it, this becomes your general thinking. It becomes part of your, primary thinking. And this is why I guess you need to first know all the models and then experience them by applying them on real world problems. This is just an example of lattice work of mental models. So for example, I listed down some of the models for project management. So in project management, there are some, like I just listed on some, there could be many other. So there's Pareto principle, there is, this another DACI model that I use while working on project. There is OKR, there is DDD, which is, which I use along with the other models. So there are these different mental models. There could be a lot more other, which I haven't listed down here. So when you're working on projects, you are aware of these models, and based on the project, size, based on the project situation, you can pick one or multiple and see which makes sense and you apply. Similarly, for running meetings and workshop, you have like multiple mental models. It's good to know everything, or at least some of them, and see which one makes sense to apply. And same goes for prioritization. Is there any question, Divya?
Yeah, we do actually. So we have one question from Vamsi. If she is asking, are there any instances where cargo culting is useful?
I can't think of anything. It just, I think doing anything without knowing what you're doing, I believe it's not the right thing to do. So this can be, doing stuff in your personal life or doing things in professional life. But yeah, I think like sometimes we do some things, uh, mainly like probably some traditional things. We just like follow them to make our parents happy. Especially, I'm sure people from India would understand. I think we're just like cargo culting over there. But we just do it without understanding the reason behind those traditions, just because we want to make our parents happy. So I would still try to reason like why it exists, and I would try to question myself like why am I doing this. But I can't think of any situation like in terms of when I'm working on projects. I would just follow some instructions because, like to hope to get some result without knowing what the instructions that I'm following.
Okay, thanks Renuka. Also, Aditya is requesting if we could talk about the other models later after we finish lattice work model.
Cool. Sorry, what do you mean the other model?
I mean the models that you talked about earlier. If you could just briefly, outline them.
Oh yeah, sure. I will be just like I'll share the slide. It has a list of 25. It's right in here. So I would say that maybe you can all read through this. It just like I've put very simple, one-liner for every single model, but I would encourage you all to maybe read more about, just look for what is inversion, what is falsification. Falsification is confirmation bias, which most of us know. What are these different models? Maybe read about them and then see how you can use them in your day-to-day job while building products. Yeah.
Okay, and we also have a question. Sorry to cut you. We also have a question from Kishore, and he's asking if there is any recent case study on cargo culting.
Recent case study. I think there are quite a few, like studies that usually companies have done. So there are these articles on HBR as well, on about cargo culting, like how different companies use cargo culting. I think one recent, I mean, for case study, I guess like it would be good if you like search for it online and see if there is a case study. But the recent phenomena that I can share with you is, for example, like how everyone is running after AI and everyone's talking about machine learning, and there are a lot of companies that say that I'm building Uber of X, Uber of Y. It just like sort of copying what exists out there and copying what is successful out there. If those companies know what they're doing and how that machine learning and AI can help their customers and the goal that they are trying to achieve, I think it's all good. But if they don't know and they're just using these terms just to to be part of the hashtag, that's to be part of the famous technology that exists out there. So I think this would be the recent cases where people are on large scale are doing cargo culting.
Okay, and we have a very interesting question from Vamsi. So one idea she has is, she had was, if you cargo culted during when situations are in the complex category, to quickly be able to validate ideas or come up with insights by looking at what the competitors have done. Is it a good way to do it?
Okay, cool. So let's go back to the complex. So this is in the complex domain, right?
So she actually is asking if we can use cargo cult during complex category, and that cargo cult is definitely following what your competitors have done.
I think just following what your competitors have done without understanding what they have done and how this will impact your customer segmentation, that's the exact definition of cargo culting. This is the exact thing that was shared with us by our CEO, Toby, as well, that just because our competitors out there are building, certain things, we don't have to do that until we understand the science behind it, behind those things, until we understand if those things make sense in our case or not. I did not understand how, I mean, I didn't understand the part of the question, like how would it fall under the complex domain? In complex domain, you don't have, so basically you are first running experiment. So you have certain competitors who are, who have built certain features. So you have to put in effort to first sort of copy those features and run those features as experiment. And then you see, if the result is right or not. I would say that even in complex domain, when you're running experiments, you need to understand, if that information makes sense. It's more of a like innovation, the new ideas that you're trying to introduce from your side. If your competitor already has those things built, I would say first see if it makes sense. But yeah, I think it's a good way of thinking that you can probably use if you don't understand why they have done it. Why is it so popular? You can definitely put it under complex domain and run experiments. Yeah, I hope it answers your question. Like I'm also like thinking through while answering.
Hey Vamsi, you are unmute, so if you need any further clarifications, you can ask for it.
Oh, yeah. So, Renuka, the last bit of what you answered was exactly what I was looking for. So, if you want to like dig into the first principle or find a kind of analyze why anybody did what they did. So, the idea that I thought was, what if you just cargo culted and see how that feature kind of translated to your product's ecosystem? Then you kind of get the data, understand, then kind of push and see, validate, and then execute it. So yeah, that kind of answered my question, the last bit.
Yeah, yeah, cool. But I think it's a great way of like sort of like thinking using like using mental models as lattice work and sort of connecting the dots with each other. But yeah, I think if there is a way that you can think through first principles and understand everything, you can't apply first principles thinking on everything, but you have to start with it, right? You have to put some effort to see if you can view things using first principle thinking. If not, then you fall back to another model and try to use the other one. So yeah, like great question and great way of looking at things.
Right. Thanks, Renuka.
Okay, so we have one more question from Christine. how is the mental model different from the design process, or how is the mental model used in a product development process?
So yeah, I think like so there are different types of mental models. There are mental models for decision making. There are mental models for thinking. There are mental models for building products, for design patterns. So I think like the design patterns that sort of like fall under mental model. If you see mental model as a general way of structured thinking. So I would say that there is no difference. It's the same thing as long as the pattern is tested and proven. You can call it as a mental model as well. So this is why like I have like I'm using term framework, mental model, processes in different places. They are like almost they're all sort of fall under the same bucket. But yeah, you can categorize mental models in different categories. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Okay, Christine, thank you for asking the question.
No problem.
We can, I think, go ahead with the session now.
Cool. I guess we were almost done with it. Why is it taking so much time? 1 sec. Yeah, so I'll just repeat what we just discussed. Mental models are thinking tools. Christine, can you please mute yourself? Yeah, thanks. Mental models are thinking tools, first principles thinking. When you boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there, that's called first principle thinking. Cynefin Framework is a decision-making framework where you make decisions based on the situation you are in and don't always be in one domain or in no domain. Cargo culting is when you don't understand the science behind things before borrowing them. That's called cargo culting. Sorry, there was a typo in here. So yeah, so I think the lattice work of mental models, the more frameworks you have, the bigger is your thinking toolbox, the more likely you are to have the right model to see the reality. So in the end, all you want to do is to understand the reality by using these different thinking techniques, by using these different mental model processes, frameworks, or the different patterns. Like I said earlier, these are the 25 mental models that I've listed here. We will be sharing this presentation with you all in the form of PDF. So please go through them, read more about them, and see if you can use them in your product building or in your domain when you're working on projects. I've also listed down some people over here. Charlie Munger, who is the sort of like father of mental models. So there were mental models which were created by philosophers back in the history, and Charlie Munger sort of like learned all those models and combined all together in doing his business, and then he also introduced those models to other people. So he has I think in one of his talks, he talks about 90 different mental models, and the talk is available on YouTube. So have a look at that. That's gold. And I think I have also posted it on our undistancing project on LinkedIn. So have a look at that. Nassim Taleb is another great personality who talks about mental models a lot in most of his book. Edward de Bono is another person. Daniel Kahneman, as I referred to him earlier. Richard Feynman and Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey has written 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So those habits also, some of those habits include mental models, how you can think through mental models to build the habits that he talks about. There are some books recommendation. These are the books that I have read, so that's why I've listed them here, which have helped me to build, this whole lattice work of mental models. and think using mental models when I'm working on projects. There's this book which I would highly recommend, Super Thinking. This person has, there's two people, they have written Super Thinking, the book about, a book about mental model, where they have covered around 300 some mental models all together in one book. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for listening to me. I hope the session helps you. Do we have any questions?
I would, yeah, one second. So we have one, we do not have a question for now, but I would actually take a moment to first of all thank all the participants and probably call for any questions if there would be. If not, then I would also take a moment to thank all the donors who helped us in raising funds for various initiatives for the session. And we look forward to seeing you again in our future sessions and webinars. Also, with the donors, we also have an exclusive one-to-one session with Renuka in 10 minutes. So that should start at 8:30 p.m. The separate link has been emailed to you, and looking forward to seeing you all there. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Divya, I'll stop sharing my screen now. Cool.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. So see you, some of you, in the next session. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for attending. Bye.